I'd like to ask the panelists to come forward to the stage as I introduce you. Tom Danneker is the president and CEO of Glenroy, a family-owned manufacturer of flexible packaging materials. Prior to Glenroy, Tom was the president and CEO at Clement Sausage Company and Vista International Packaging, now Visco TPAC, and a vice president and member of the leadership team at Johnsonville. Tom has helped companies achieve sustainable, profitable growth by combining a strategic vision with execution disciplines. Tom received his undergraduate degree in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and his MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Tom. Benjamin Gover is COO and joined Glenn Rieder in April of 2018 and is responsible for the overall operations of Glenn Rieder, including residential, project management, manufacturing, procurement, engineering, and field superintendents. Prior to Glenn Rieder, Benjamin worked at Modine Manufacturing Company and held multiple positions of increasing authority managing engineering, project management, operations, sales, acquisitions, and business management. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from MSOE and a Master's of Science degree in Engineering Management from MSOE's Rieder School of Business. Benjamin. Pat Koppa joined Flow Industries as president in October 2019 and has led the 100% ESOP organization in establishing short and long-term priorities and building a dedicated workforce. A Wisconsin native, Pat earned his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1987. He then served 7 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy's Nuclear Attack Submarine Force. Following his military career, Pat earned an MBA in operations management from UW-Madison. He then spent 16 years in diverse leadership roles at Harley-Davidson and was later president at PowerTest. Pat, and thank you for your service. JP Moran is president of Lmi Packaging Solutions. JP and his sisters, Jen and Meg, represent the third generation of family ownership for Pleasant Prairie-based Lmi Packaging Solutions, a manufacturer of heat, seal, die-cut lidding, and pressure-sensitive labels, predominantly for the food and beverage marketplace. The company's culture was started by JP's grandfather, Chester, and nurtured and grown under his mother, Jean's leadership. 4 core values, community, integrity, courage, and service guide LMI as it grows and thrives into the third generation. JP hopes to create a space for all the team to catch opportunity, which is there for each one every single day. He believes that a mindset for success and the law of attraction are key in accomplishing your dreams and being a leader in the communities we live in. Sachin Shivaram is CEO of Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry. Sachin joined Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry, a 115-year-old family-owned manufacturing company in Manitowoc, as the company's first non-family CEO in 2019. He was previously president of Samuel Pressure Vessel Group in Marinette. Sachin earned his undergraduate degree from Harvard University and a master's degree from the University of Cambridge before working at McKinsey, and then earned a JD at Yale. While in law school, he was inspired to work in the metals industry rather than pursue a law career. He worked at steel companies across North and South America before returning to his home state of Wisconsin in 2016. And our moderator today is Arthur Thomas, managing editor with BizTimes Media. In addition to his editor duties, Arthur has spent a great deal of time at BizTimes as a reporter covering the manufacturing industry. So Arthur, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you panelists for being part of this. So I was hired by BizTimes in late 2015, and one of the things I was brought on to do was cover the manufacturing industry. So I'd worked previously in Waukesha County, so I was familiar with a lot of manufacturing company names, but maybe didn't know exactly what various businesses do. And kind of reinforcing that point, I went to Germantown High School, which some of you may know is literally located in the middle of an industrial park. There's MGS Manufacturing is just across the street. Drove by that on my way to school every day. No clue what they did when I was in high school, things like that. But once I started at BizTimes, I started covering the manufacturing industry. What really became apparent to me is how different and how much the manufacturing industry covers. That's a really broad blanket term for just the group that we have up here on stage represents a lot of different industries. themselves. And not only, differences from plastics to metals to food manufacturing, things like that, but also the markets you serve, whether you're serving the oil and gas market, mining, automotive, different areas. Within that, you may have, even within one company, some end markets up, some end markets down. Of course, that's why you all work to diversify your businesses and have as many different opportunities as you can. But I think that's not always obvious to the outside world how much different is going on there. So you have all those things, then you throw in the macroeconomic economy, which comes with its own ups and downs and headwinds and things like that. And just in the time I've been at BizTimes, when I came on, the mining industry was having some struggles, oil and gas was struggling. We moved forward into 2017, we had the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that provided a lot of fuel for businesses. 2018, 2019, we've got trade and tariff wars that certainly provide a lot of uncertainty, maybe opportunity for some, challenges for others. Then just as things we're getting back to maybe a little bit normal, COVID shows up, throws a massive wrench in everything. For some businesses, if you were making toilet paper at that time, I think that was a good business. Hand wipes, a couple years ago we had the folks from Rebel Wipes on the manufacturing panel. That was back when we had to do it pre-recorded and in a social distanced fashion. So that was good, but if you were in a consumer demand area, maybe business wasn't so good. Demand shut off overnight. Then it came rocketing back, and so suddenly we've got supply chain issues and later inflation issues. All this is to say, there's a lot of ups and downs and twists and turns along the way for the manufacturing industry. So when we set about planning our event this year, we wanted to kind of get into that because whether things are up or down, most of the manufacturers I talk to are always trying to move their business forward. You're trying to either, maybe the top line isn't growing, ideally it would be. Maybe the bottom line isn't growing, maybe it would be, ideally. But everyone's always trying to move their organization forward, the continuous improvement type things. So we wanted to maybe offer our attendees some insights into how you can move your business forward from our great panel up here. So hopefully we can dig into some of those details of what's working, I guess, is the long way of getting to that. Want to start with kind of first question, state of your business. Dan shared a little bit about all of your backgrounds and kind of what you do, and Tom, we'll start with you. So Glenroy, flexible packaging company, makes printed high barrier, flexible packaging films and pouches. You serve food and beverage, pharmaceutical, nutraceuticals and supplements, beauty and healthcare, household, pet foods and treats. So tell us a little bit, how are things going at Glenroy? What's the state of the state? Is business good? Is it challenged? How are things going?
Okay, thanks, Arthur. Hello, everybody. So, state of the state, it's fascinating. I mean, like for all of you, I'm sure. There isn't one answer to this question. I mean, certainly you heard Dan talk a little bit about really the headwinds all of us are dealing with, whether that be supply chain issues or employment issues or recession fears, et cetera. We're dealing with all that as well. But I think the ups and downs is kind of an interesting topic. Last year was a great year, despite all the challenges. We grew almost 20%, or actually over 20% last year. This year we're still growing, but at a much, much slower rate. And it goes back to everything. I mean, whether that be really a big part right now is our customers' fear of recession, that they're pulling back on inventory levels, right? And so, we got all these things going on in our economy right now that are affecting our business. But for the most part, we're growing. And we are more profitable now than, frankly, actually the business has ever been. We made a huge capital investment beginning right before COVID, of course. We were all in once you sign those documents. So, we need to grow and we have to grow. And so a big part of what we'll talk about today is how you overcome those headwinds to achieve growth despite everything going on around you.
Certainly. Ben, we'll go to you next. Glenn Rieder, make high-end architectural millwork, serve a number of different areas, but some of them kind of consumer areas challenged by COVID in particular. Tell us a little bit about kind of state of the state at Rieder. How are things going? How have kind of come through the last few years?
Hello. My story is very different from my colleague to my right. 2019 was our record sales. You know, we walked into early 2020 and had high aspirations. When the economy hit, it hit our business really, really hard. So we provide architectural millwork, but our focus is resorts, casinos, restaurants, hotels. So every one of our customer bases kind of fell down relatively quickly. And we had to navigate how do you continue a project in a safe manner, because we're not only manufacturing product in our factories, but we also install it on the job sites. Now, 2022 has been kind of the year of transition. 2023 setting itself up for another record year for us. So we have a really bright future, but it's been, as almost everyone else is going to say, a very tumultuous experience between fighting inflation and hiring people back, getting more people on, and managing that growth, and then dealing with supply chain issues on top of that. So.
Certainly. We'll dive more into that in a minute. Pat, we'll go to you next. Flow Industries, kind of really interesting products. You guys make vertical reciprocating conveyors. So you can explain what that is to us in a minute, but also...
Don't call them elevators.
We won't call them elevators. But other things you guys make, a five-story bourbon barrel lift.
That's right.
80-foot fighter jet lifts, ocean home window lifts, and telescope lens lifts. So some interesting products there. But tell us a bit about Flow Industries and kind of state of the state where you guys think where things are at for you right now.
Okay. So hello everyone, I'm Pat. Been with Flow for 3 years. Company's been around since 1977, so 45 years. Kind of quiet up on Titonia Avenue. These VRCs, we call them, it's different than an elevator because it has different codes. So we're a very cost-effective solution to lift things up and down. So we're elevators for products, not people. That's what I tell people. And it makes us about a third the price of a freight elevator. So that's really a nice option for people that want to move things up and down and not use a dangerous forklift. To the direct question, oh, by the way, you missed cart conveyors from our product line. So if anybody goes to the Target over at Bayshore and you like that little escalator for your shopping cart, that's a Flow product that we designed 20 years ago. So it's kind of a fun thing. The pandemic was interesting for us because our core customer base, like everybody else, was in contraction. We dropped about 20% with our normal customers. But as we were just trying to, retrenching with that, we were brought back into the e-commerce space with Amazon and brought in back as a supplier. We'd been 1 years ago, and they actually just took off, right? So e-commerce took off. And we were at the table, and it's a blessing and a curse because we grew 150% in 2 years. Through a pandemic with people going home on COVID quarantine and isolation rules and then inflation taking off and everything else. So it was a very interesting time. And you're holding the tail of the tiger, and they love to say they're building the airplane as they're flying it, and that's all funny, but it makes planning really hard and you're really reactionary. And so that's what we dealt with for those 2 years. And we had things getting fairly well under control. Our core customers this last year, actually starting in 2021, came back in spades. So we were really in a booming shape in terms of the amount of business that we had. Too much last year, so that was last year's struggle. We had agreed to too much business and overcommitted, which made us struggle to hit all of our delivery dates. So that was a stressor. This year we felt we had things dialed in, we were getting our quality system set, and then they dialed back their plans dramatically. Jeff Bezos moves out, someone else comes in, they decide to retrench and rethink their massive expansion. And so we've gone through a 20% contraction this year. We had 30 open positions continuously for the last year and a half. We finally got down to 4 open positions, and on August 22nd, we conducted a reduction in force of 30 positions at our company. So talk about a maddening bang your head against the wall, but that's where we're at. We've adjusted our structure to our current conditions. We're right-sized now, and we actually had a great profitable month in September, so we think we're on the path back up at this point.
That's good. JP, we'll go to you next. Lmi Packaging, lids and labels, primarily for the food and beverage sector. Maybe touch on a little bit of where we might see some of your products, and how things are going at LMI.
Thanks, Arthur. My name is JP. Lmi Packaging. We've been in business for 55 years. My grandfather started the business. My mother ran the business for about 30 years, and now we're in the third generation, and we're just trying not to screw it up. So we're doing all right so far. Our business has doubled in the last 2 years, so we've really taken an aggressive approach in the market. COVID's played a role in that, so we've had a lot of opportunity, but we've caught a lot of that opportunity. So a little combination of luck and aggressiveness has really helped us grow the business, which is nice. We have 3 focuses for this year, and the first is to be a beacon of light in the community. You've all heard what's going on here in Kenosha County, and we're in Pleasant Prairie, so however we can support the community that's who we are as a business, and that's how my grandfather started the business. Very important to us. Culture is important. The second one is to be an employer of choice. We've got a lot of businesses coming down here, a lot of the competition sitting in the room, right, for employees, but it's a big world. We can all work together, and it's pretty great. That's a focus for us, is how we keep employees, how do we inspire our employees, and how do we, essentially just keep them over a long period of time, which I said. And then third one is monster sales growth. We're doing it. It's been pretty exciting. We're doing all the lids that you see on the K-Cups. If you drink out of a Keurig, who doesn't drink out of a Keurig now, right? You could imagine in the COVID landscape, single-serve food products has essentially boomed. We're not going to restaurants. We're staying at home, and I guess convenience would be the word I would use. There's other words, but that's the positive word, convenience. And so we're the lid that you pull off of a yogurt cup, the circle lid you have on a K-Cup. If you eat a gelatin, or if we just started in the last year doing labels for some craft brewers. Three Floyds was our first, which is pretty exciting, down in Munster, Indiana. So food packaging, we used to say decorated garbage, but we've resisted saying that, being that environmentally it's not necessarily the funniest joke to lead with anymore. But that's where we're at, and that's who we are.
Gotcha. And last but certainly not least, Sachin, Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry. As Dan mentioned, 115-year-old family company, first non-family CEO. You guys do metal casting and machining, custom aluminum alloyed parts, serving heavy equipment, medical devices, aerospace, automotive, and consumer goods. What's the state of the state? How are things going at Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry?
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing about going last is you guys already said all the good stuff. Our company doesn't suffer from the confusion that Art mentioned. Our name says exactly what we do and where we do it. We're an aluminum foundry in Wisconsin. And actually now we've grown to some other states, Indiana and Minnesota. But so the thoughts that come to my mind in response to your question, I think number one, I think this economy is changing much faster than most of us realize, at least faster than I myself realize, partly because of the nature of what many of us do, which is we kind of manufacture the proverbial cog in the machine, and we have customers who make something else and they supply somebody else, and then they eventually supply Caterpillar or John Deere or Aaron's company or something like that. So we're very far from the end market, which is where the change is happening. And so right now, like many of you, we have a great backlog. We're running overtime still. Sales are super good. But I just have this gnawing feeling that things are great until they aren't. And that'll happen very quickly. And I was telling one of our managers who runs our machine shop division that our customers never have an incentive to tell us when things are going to slow down, because they want us to be at max capacity, ready to meet whatever demand they have until they don't need us to do that. And so they have no interest in telling us when things are going to slow down. And so we really got to watch the financial markets to understand, what's happening in the economy. Some other thoughts, inflation. I know that's a topic of concern, and it was noted in the WMEP survey. For us, like for many, inflation, the beginning of inflation was awesome. It was when we jacked up prices, our costs hadn't caught up yet, and it was just great. And now we're kind of running on the fumes of that inflation, and it's not so great. Labor has caught up, materials have caught up, and so it'll be really interesting to see how we all protect our gross margins at this time when further price increases don't seem to be supported by the end market. Thinking about a slowdown as a family company, one thing that it took me some time to internalize was, there's really nothing to worry about in a slowdown other than liquidity. If we are liquid, we have access to capital, there's no reason for a 115-year-old company to worry about any potential slowdown, which is different for me. I came from public company background, big company background. We're all working towards meeting quarterly numbers. And for many of you, if you're in small businesses like I am, that's thankfully not a concern. It's really about liquidity, but the gravity of that concern is pretty strong. I mean, if you're not liquid, then you're in kind of deep trouble. On supply chain, my standard joke is that we don't have supply chain issues, but we cause them for everybody else. We are one of those manufacturers that's the very beginning of the supply chain, and when we don't have enough people to make what you need, then it causes problems all the way down to the end market. So my apologies for what we've done to you.
It's because of you. That's it.
You found the leprechaun at the end of the rainbow, or the opposite of that. The last thing I would say is what is difficult in this moment is how to invest in a way that is consistently value accretive. It was easier, I think, over the past 5 years to understand, hey, this is going to be a good investment, this is going to be a good acquisition, and now the calculus is kind of much more complicated. The thing that I go back to, and I was wrestling with a discounted cash flow analysis of a acquisition we were looking at. And it was just like the price just didn't make sense, and I was like, how do we get to that price? And it kind of dawned on me simplistically as I was fiddling with Excel, which was it's the terminal value. The terminal value ultimately is what determines the value of a company. In the first 3-4 years, they may be bad, or maybe you may be working to improve the return on investment. But really, if you can make it work at the end of the day, for a family company like ours, that's all that matters, and that's what creates value, is what happens in the terminal value. And that's something that I've really learned to take to heart, is that we're investing for the very long term.
Gotcha. A lot of great insights already from our panel. Want to stay with you, Sachin, and since you mentioned that you're the cause of all of our supply chain challenges, my next question was around how are we dealing with the supply chain challenges, and I mean, are we out of the woods on some of those things? I guess to the extent that you are dealing with those, what's worked in terms of navigating these supply chain issues? And everyone else who wants to jump in after Sachin, certainly do so. But where are we at on this the supply chain bottlenecks we've had?
The simple answer of what's worked is hiring people. So we've increased our headcount by about 40% over the past 3 years to meet demand. And then we increased headcount by increasing wages. We've increased wages significantly. We pay about $25 an hour now in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, which is quite a good wage, when the prevailing median wage is around 16 still. So that's a simplistic answer. But what I think maybe would be interesting for your audience to hear is that we make a durable good, that generally has a lifetime of 10 to 20 years, and it's really not normal for demand to go so high and then sustain. And so there's clearly a whiplash effect going on in the economy, where there was a lack of production during a defined amount of time, and then everybody's catching up. And so the answer to your question is, how does the supply chain resolve itself? It's when demand comes down, and it has to come down because with GDP growing at 2%, it doesn't make sense for industrial production to grow at 15% a year. Just the product has nowhere to go. So I'm just saying, I think the supply chain resolves itself when the economy slows down.
Mm-hmm. It'll resolve itself eventually, but we've got to deal with it in the short term. So JP, how are you guys dealing with supply chain issues? Are you facing them? What are you seeing? What's helping you navigate them as they do come up?
Yeah, we are facing a lot of supply chain issues. In a lot of ways, I think we're leaving a lot on the table because of the supply chain issues. And so do I see it slowing down here soon? No. So 2023 seems like it's already kind of set, and some of our suppliers have already given us that view of what it's going to look like. I'd say the piece that stands out to us is we had a couple of folks in the other day, doesn't matter where they're from, and it was the supply chain thing's tough. We just got to pass the price through. You just got to pass the price through. It's real easy. Just pass the price through, right? So it's a little bit of a short game perspective versus a long game perspective. We've picked up a lot of customers because of our competition's maybe mess ups right now, and so we're trying to take that long-term approach around pricing and communicate what's happening in the market, what's happening from our supply chain. And then we're not necessarily going to match that price pass through sometimes, which is hurting the bottom line. But I think it's going to land us some customers long term. The one thing I would tell you is we've got a handful of suppliers, and just for this conversation, half of them are giving us some really good lead time on communication. That's key. Communicate. Some of them are sending us an email at 5 o'clock on Friday saying on Monday your price is going to go up 25%. And so to be treated like that, you remember that, right? And so that's what we're trying not to do to our customers, right? We don't want to catch them off guard. We want to communicate it is real, and we'll prove that it's real. We'll give you the right data, but we just don't want to catch anyone off guard and treat them like crap, quite honestly.
Pat, Ben, Tom, any supply chain thoughts to add in?
Are you looking for maybe the lead time issues that we have, or the cost, or both?
I'll take both. But it also,
both
how are you dealing with it? What's
Yeah.
working to get you through it?
I know when you asked that question, it felt like a trick question because you said, what have you done that's worked? I'm like, I don't know, I have an answer to that. We've tried, primarily we've used an approach to, first we were missing our ship dates because everything that had a lead time loaded in was understated, and then the suppliers are calling us a week before our project's supposed to ship saying, yeah, that gear motor's not coming for 2 months, the one you're supposed to get this morning. And so then we had to call a customer and disappoint them, and that's always fun. So then we had our employees under great duress because they're dealing with angry customers every day. So we tried to make it a cross-functional approach to revisit lead times, the worst lead times from all supply components. And it had to do with steel, it had to do with rollers, it had to do with electrical components was the biggest problem that's still sustaining itself and remains a problem. But by promising more realistic lead times that we felt we could actually deliver, and then holding ourselves accountable with no excuses to hit those longer lead times without inflating them beyond where it became comfortable, because we knew our competition wouldn't be doing that. So we couldn't just make lead times really long because then we'd lose jobs. So it's that balance. And then there's the cost side of it where we just had to, we were not on top of, like Sachin, with those, benefiting from inflation, we took it in the shorts because we did not keep on top of our pricing, our cost analysis, and it wasn't until October of 21 where we really started to implement a plan we had not been using that we should have. So we did quarterly reviews of cost, and we've done quarterly price adjustments ever since then. And so now we're finally starting to catch up on getting our margins back to where they're supposed to be.
How important was communication in providing those more realistic lead times to customers? When you know the competition probably isn't doing that, and it'd be really easy for them to look like, well, that's a month earlier, I'd like that. Well, how important was it to really communicate, this is what we're doing, we're being realistic here, we're trying to be as straightforward as possible?
I think it's critical to be realistic and communicate that we're trying to be realistic and not overpromise, and I think customers generally appreciated it, quite honestly. And in the 2 years of craziness that we've lived through, I think I know of one job that we didn't get because our lead time was too long. And even the jobs we had to push back a month in the schedule or two because of other delays and such, none of them canceled because we learned very quickly they didn't have another option. And we had to reinforce it with our team. They're all freaking out about calling a customer and like, look, everybody has the same situation. Will he be happy? No, but good or bad news does not get better with age. It's not like cheese. You got to call them and let them know.
So from our perspective, we have 4 operations in 4 different locations, so Wisconsin, Las Vegas, and then Tijuana, Mexico. And we were consolidating vendors, and in hindsight, that was probably something we probably had moved too quickly on. So as we got in the pandemic, it was more finding regional. So not only does it, diversify your supply base, but also, reductions in freight and other items such as that. I would say overall, if you go back 2 years ago, there was just things you couldn't get. And now things are become more predictable. Prices are probably higher than we want. Some stuff is starting to come down. But even the stuff that hasn't come down it's at least predictable so that you can, to JP's point, you can communicate it to your customer base without a lot of surprises.
Maybe just building on what Benjamin was just saying, there's the classic unintended consequence. Procurement, that's a hard job. And you think about, you're going to gravitate to that supplier where you're going to get the best cost and, the best lead time, right? Well, next thing you know, 80% of your business or supply is coming from 5 people. And then if one of those people can't supply, you're in big trouble. And that was our lesson. And I'm reinforcing it as we speak, which is we're not going to have one supplier for anything anymore. I don't care. Pay a little more, deal with a little bit longer lead time. You cannot rely on one supplier for critical material anymore. And your procurement people are going to do it. I guarantee you, because that's easy, the path of least resistance. And my procurement people are doing it right now because things are getting a little better. Oh, well, we'll just move more of our volume to this one supplier. Well, no, guys. We're not going to make the same mistake again. All right? We're going to have 3 suppliers for all critical material, and at least 2 of them are going to have a fair share. So once again, that killed us at the beginning. We had 2 of our 5 biggest suppliers went on force majeure. And you guys probably know what that is. Legally, they can't supply you more if they want to. That almost shut us down because we weren't ready for that. So I think the big insight we got, the big learning is you better have a diversified supply chain, particularly in this environment, but in general moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Got an audience question that maybe runs a little bit counter to that diverse, having multiple suppliers. Question is, are you doing more to integrate with your suppliers to alleviate the supply chain issues? So obviously having multiples, but is anyone doing anything in terms of getting closer to them, integrating with them more to deal with some of these issues?
I think just like anything, there were suppliers that kind of carried us through. Not only was it one of the big supply issues for us was the border shutting down. We get raw product in from Canada, high-end veneers come from Europe in many cases, and then we had operations in Mexico and the border shut down in many cases there, so you literally couldn't move things across. And you found these solutions. In some cases, there were new companies, and that established maybe a new partnership or relationship or friendship, and it's now extending that just beyond just that one purchase order that got us through, but how do we make this a long-term supplier so that we can rely on these for the future and also be a supplier for others for solutions in the future as well.
We had some success with some of our electronic distributors, which I hadn't anticipated. They actually were willing to, if we gave them more visibility to our forecasts, which were large, everyone wanted in. We were growing fast. So as long as we invited them in and shared very openly what our best projections were, and they were willing to take on stock of popular items that they could use eventually. They were willing to take that on for us even without a PO, which I was surprised by. So that was one of the strategies that did work. It dramatically reduced our lead times by doing that.
I had a comment and then I actually wanted to ask Tom a question if I could. So on your question, Art, yes, so we actually acquired a machine shop, which would be a supplier for us, even, not because it would pay for itself in terms of additional margin, which actually doesn't, but because it gives us flexibility on lead time. And so the value we found in being able to control a machine shop and just, place jobs in there when we needed it to be able to meet customer demands, we felt that, hard to justify financially, but it just made sense for us strategically. Mm-hmm. But the question, I thought Tom brought up an interesting point about, supplier diversity. And I wonder, those of you who buy components and things like that, how have you dealt with, the supplier diversity initiative when it leads to higher cost? And specifically, when you're trying to onshore something that you're buying abroad, how do you swallow that, or don't?
You want me to answer? I mean, frankly, in this environment, if there's a time where you can get away with higher costs, it's right now. And we have absolutely accepted a higher cost through supplier diversity, but we pass that on to our customers with the explanation. The reason why we're doing this is so that we have multiple sources so that we can continue to supply you. And if there's a time in the history of business that a customer will understand that, it's right now. So you're right. Maybe 5 years ago, a customer might have pushed back. Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to pay for your supply diversity. Right now, they're not pushing back at all. So, yes, our cost is higher doing that, but we just pass that right on to the customer.
I was going to say, if I was your customer, I would say, that's a great strategy. why don't you use the low-cost supplier for my stuff and the high-cost supplier for the other guy's stuff?
Going to your question, for us, one of the things in terms of making sure that we're getting this relationship with our suppliers is we put in place supplier scorecards. And this was actually really interesting when we did it because my procurement people had a perception of who our best suppliers were. And then we actually put it on paper in terms of lead time and delivery accuracy and quality issues and all the other metrics that go with the supplier scorecard. It was amazing. I'd say, a couple of the guys that they thought were in our top 10 weren't. And so, to your question, how do you make sure you're managing your suppliers? I think you got to be careful with perception and reality as well. And using a discipline like a supplier scorecard can really help you understand who really are your best suppliers and maybe who's a supplier you've worked with for 20 years, but maybe they're not as good as you think they are. Mm-hmm. So, it took a lot of effort to put these scorecards in place, but it's amazing the learning we got from it.
I want to shift a little bit to a little more forward-looking. We've been talking about supply chain, and that's been the story of the last year plus. Looking into 2023, thinking about investments in growth and things like that. Got an audience question of how does the current economic outlook affect your capital investment plans going forward? And just generally investing in the business heading into next year. Sachin, you touched on a little bit of the calculus has changed in the last several months.
Just 2 weeks ago, we broke ground on our largest expansion ever. And this wasn't like one of those investments that we all made right before COVID where, we did it on the basis of something and then the whole world changed. I think we recognize that we definitely recognize that, growth is going to be slower. But again, for us, this is one of those long-term investments where we felt, strategically, generationally, it's going to be positive for us. And, to relate it back to kind of, Tom and Pat kind of diverged on, are you going to take higher cost supply into your business model and move on, or are you not going to do it? In that balance hangs this question of whether companies like ours are going to continue to see growth or not. Because we need kind of what Tom's saying, because we are a higher cost supplier than a foundry in China. But if the world reverts to low cost at all costs, and then we're not going to succeed. So I think the real question is are we going to have kind of a secular growth and inflation path in American industry, or are we not? And I don't think we know the answer. We're kind of betting that we will. We're betting that geopolitical stuff is all kind of causing everybody to turn inward, but we could be wrong, and then our investment would not be good.
Mm. Anyone else on 2023 and forward-looking investments?
We're kind of done. We made our investments last year. We did have plenty of revenue, plenty of profits, and we did improve our facility, and we leased the facility next door, moved all of our assembly operations to that facility, almost doubled our manufacturing square footprint in 2021. So we're in good shape in that regard, and right now, because we're retrenching and kind of right-sizing, we're not looking to invest much.
Maybe just ask about when you were on that kind of rocket ship ride up, with Amazon and things were looking really, really positive. How did you go about managing, making investments and thinking about, okay, do we make capital investments, do we not, to meet this demand that's great right now but may or may not be there in the future?
We're just not that sophisticated. I'm listening to Sachin talk through his processes and I'm like, man, this is really, they know what they're doing. We were just reactionary and through serendipity, the building next door, 70,000 square foot building, suddenly had a for rent sign on it. And our tenant that had been there for 15 years that we'd been in this building was gone overnight. And we're like, whoa, well, there's a building we could use. It was like that fast, and we needed the space. And that was only a lease. That wasn't a capital purchase of anything. And we bought some equipment we need, but we're not that kind of business. We're a lot of welding and assembly. Welding, paint, and assembly is generally what we do. Our expertise is in our engineering designs is primarily.
2023, looking forward, investments?
So we made a very big investment just going right into COVID. We went from a 120,000 square foot facility to a 240,000 square foot facility and added equipment accordingly. You know, it was a bit of both. It was certainly a leap, while at the same time based on a market analysis on our projected demand. But to some degree, maybe we'll talk about it later, I had the opportunity to run a couple private equity-owned business, and now this is a family-owned business. The look and the view on investment is definitely different. I mean, you definitely have to be focused on an ROI. You definitely have to be able to service your debt. Did I say that right, BMO? But at the same time, you can be more forward-looking. All right. When I was with private equity, if it didn't have less than a year return, we weren't doing it. Trust me, doubling our manufacturing facility does not have a year return on it. But once again, being a family-owned company, we can look a little more forward. So it's a little bit of a leap, and it's a little bit of the math in terms of the investment we made. It keeps me up at night, to be honest, especially in this economic environment. But we're all in. And to some degree, burn the ships, right? I mean, we're all in it together. We've made this investment. We got to make it work. Sometimes that can create a lot of collaboration, a lot of necessity is the mother of all invention. It can create a lot of innovation in a company when you are willing to invest.
So from our perspective, we did 3 large investments in 2018 in 3 different locations. And then 21, we purchased a company down in Florida. So I think we're taking 22 and 23 as kind of wait and see years, and we've targeted 24 for kind of our next investment.
Mm-hmm. Is that dictated by your prior actions or the economy or both?
A little of both. I mean, obviously the balance sheet as well as the economy are fundamental impacts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. JP, any thoughts on making investments and what time I had to say about family business making investments?
Yeah, a lot of the same. We are investing, we've essentially on one side of our operation, we've doubled the capacity in the last year, adding machines, and so we plan on doing that into 23. On the other side, which is our print side of the operation, we plan on adding capacity this year as well. Mm-hmm. So we're really just taking an aggressive approach to try to catch some of this opportunity in the market. And then we're going to need to work ourselves back into the margins. We've been killed on margins this year versus last year, and so we have some work ahead of us to do there.
Gotcha. I want to switch to a little bit of a conversation around workforce and labor. And JP, I know, well, for all of us, we were talking ahead of this, and I mean, everyone knows that hiring. I wrote a cover story earlier this year, I think it was, that hiring in 22 is hard. Low unemployment rate, things like that. So what works to get people in the door? And JP, I know you've got a couple of interesting programs, one with work release from Department of Corrections, the other with college students from Carthage. Maybe tell us a little bit about how those work and how it helps the company meet your labor needs.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, no different than anyone else in the area, we've got a lot of big companies coming in, the Haribos, Uline, Amazon. I mean, a lot of the big folks here, and the entry rates are rising, so we said, how do we get creative here? And which is essentially why we made the employer of choice a focus for the year. So we came up with a couple of different ideas. The correction facility idea, we had kind of tossed that around for a couple of years. Half the team was adamant no, half the team was adamant yes. So those were fun conversations to navigate. And so we finally decided we were going to take a shot, and we had some stipulations around the type of folks that we would work with, making sure, we got a lot of different people in the building, and we want to make sure everyone feels safe, and did a couple of constructive groups to make sure everybody was comfortable, and it worked. And so far, it's been excellent. They work over third shift. They never call in. They work 6 days a week. They want to work more, and so we just want to keep them healthy so we don't burn them out, right? Mm-hmm. It's a male facility, so they're all fellows that are trying to work themselves back into the real world here, and hopefully have a stepping point once they are released to come and have a job right off the bat, mm-hmm. which has happened twice here over the last 6 months, which is pretty nice. The big one, the one that's really helping us right now, is our program with Carthage College, and so we're saying our temp employees are turning over quick. Some of them will leave for 50 cents or $1. How do we educate them, and how do we essentially have them see what we have to offer from a cultural standpoint before they decide to leave, right? And that's a tricky one for us. So one of the ideas was we hit up some of the colleges in the area, some of the high schools, and President Swallow at Carthage, phenomenal guy, visionary, very aggressive, showed up at LMI the next day after we reached out to him, and we came up with this program, and I believe we started talking to him in April. Yeah, let me see here. Yep, April, and then our first students were here in June. And essentially what we do is they work 15 to 30 hours part-time while they're going to school. We pay them a fair wage, which is more than what they can earn on campus working at the gift shop. And then essentially we put $6 into a pool for every hour that they work that gets sent directly to Carthage to pay down tuition. The program's been awesome. We've had 50 students through in 1 year. They're excellent. They have high energy. They love the culture. We don't do the bully thing at LMI, and so we've got a lot of different age groups and a lot of diversity, and so making sure that the young adults come in and feel safe, that's important to us. And it's also allowed us to see some of the folks that, how do I say this, for their entire life have probably been beat down a bit, and now they're in the workforce for 30 years, and they're getting an opportunity to lead a 20-year-old through training on a print press, and the excitement level there to watch them lead has been awesome. And so that program's really been great. And now what we're working with is essentially to create a classroom in the building, and then President Swallow is considering a way that we can have the students earn college credit. So say you work 6 hours at LMI, immediately hop off the floor and you go into a 3-hour classroom. Carthage teacher will come down to LMI and they could earn college credit that way. And so his focus, which is really great, is helping that 33% of his school that can't afford all 4 years. And so that's what he's really trying to conquer right now. He's doing a great job, and it's really helpful for LMI because, again, they show up, they don't call in, and they're very excited about, learning manufacturing.
Yeah. Dan mentioned it when he was in the introductions of the importance of culture for your company, and whether it's the Department of Corrections program or Carthage, just a lot of new people, new bodies coming into the building. How have you gone about trying to make sure the culture is reinforced and the culture stays where you want it, doesn't go off the rails, having all this influx of new people coming in to the company?
Well, it's a priority, so it's what we lead with in every conversation that we have from a strategic standpoint. This is kind of a playful, but one of the things that we'll do is all the folks on the floor love Carhartt, so immediately we give them a Carhartt beanie so that the whole plant's got Carhartt running through the building, and it can't be anything but Carhartt. But you have to live it. And so one of my favorite things, personally, I like going through different companies and exploring and seeing the way facilities work, but you can't fake it. You can't fake culture, period. And you can tell when you walk through a facility how the folks interact with whoever's giving you a tour, if it's real or not, right? And so it's really the second they come through the door, we have an onboarding process with a video, and we bring in some of the folks on the floor so they're going to meet some of their peers from day one. And we're really just trying to, for lack of better words, like latch in early around this place is different than all the places that you've been before that you've left. And so that's really what we do. But the secret sauce is just making sure that it's a priority really for us.
Yeah. Sachin, you guys opened a new training center that helped, I think the Department of Workforce Development had a press release about it. I think the number was new hire turnover went down, was it 100% down to 15%? So this dramatic improvement in your new hire turnover. What's that program all about? How does it work for you guys?
Yeah, no, it's a great program. I mean, embarrassingly, yes, our turnover was 100%, which is insane, if you think about it. And historically, our turnover had been 6%, And so, for us, the learning was this tight labor market has turned everything on its head, starting with how do we train new workers? It used to be, go out there and, if you have questions, ask the person next to you and you'll figure it out. And the fact that the job was high paying was good enough to get people to stay. Now when we throw them into a confusing environment, they leave, understandably. And so what we did was funded by Fast Forward program by the DWD. We created a new training center, which is staffed by a dedicated supervisor, his only job or her only job is to train new employees. And then we have translators when needed. And, increasingly, I'd say, Manitowoc and the other locations where we are in rural Minnesota and Indiana were generally not very diverse, and now we're seeing big influx of people who speak Spanish primarily or only, and Hmong and other languages, and so we needed to have translators on staff, and the DWD program pays for that as well, and we certainly plan to maintain that. But then our turnover, once we gave people a welcoming, safe environment to train, turnover went down dramatically to 15%, which is still too high. But clearly attributable to that program. And a couple of other things I wanted to mention was, I loved JP's story about the DOC, the Department of Corrections, programs. I think we're all doing that. Yesterday, so I met new employees every Monday on their first day. And yesterday we hired a guy, Danny, who had spent the last 3 years in Kettle Moraine prison, and he's been in and out of prison for 17 years, and this was his third or fourth stint in prison, and he said, never before have I felt so prepared for success coming out of prison. And I think that speaks to whatever the state is doing, to help prepare people in prison for leaving. Also speaks to what employers like you guys are doing to train them. And also kind of on a very personal note, I asked him, what was it that helped you turn things around? And he has a 10-year-old son who tried to commit suicide, and it was because he misses his father, Danny in jail, and that was a turnaround for him, and it really humbles you to think like that's what we're doing. We're helping people put the first brick in their new path in life, and that's what makes I think all of our jobs rewarding, is these kind of people and cultural elements. And then, last point I'd say is, putting all of this in context, everybody's being so thoughtful about culture building, about kind of ferreting out the marginalized populations to help get them into the workforce. And, it's really a feature of a very tight labor market, especially in Wisconsin, where we're really, even though we may all compete for employees, we're actually fighting against Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Texas, wherever everybody, everywhere where everyone is going for the warm weather, we're all kind of fighting together to keep population with us and attract people here. I'd say encouragingly, every week, when I meet with employees, I see more and more people who are moving to Wisconsin for the quality of life aspect. But I think that raises the incumbency on all of us to advocate for policies that keep this a great place to live, because we don't have the crutch of the weather. People come here for good jobs that are offset by low-cost housing and good schools and good infrastructure. And if we lose that advantage, then we're in trouble. So I think looking at all the people who are so influential in the Milwaukee area and in Wisconsin, that's something that we can all kind of rally around.
Mm-hmm. Pat, you mentioned the 30 positions you had open, and you finally got it down to 4. You guys are an ESOP. Curious, do you lean into that ESOP in recruiting? How did you get it down? Eventually. What worked to get it down over the last year?
What got it down, truthfully, from 30 down to 4 was peeling back the onion and finding out why are we not making any progress? And it turned out it was speed. I talked with a recruiter, took him to lunch, and he confided in me that your company's really slow. We send you leads, and you don't get an appointment scheduled for sometimes a week. Everybody else has an appointment scheduled the next day. He said, this labor market is fast. And we were finding, by the time we even got someone scheduled to get an interview, they'd already have another job they accepted. I mean, it was moving so quickly. So speed was the number one thing, and giving our managers an appreciation that you can't just blame HR when they've sent you 3 candidates that have sat in your inbox and it took you 4 or 5 days to respond to them and even look at the resumes, and then you complain about HR and how they're not getting anybody hired. So anyway, it was speed. The ESOP is unique because we are an employee stock ownership plan company. We're 100% as of last year. So we do lean into that, and it does add another retirement benefit that we can tout. So we give about a total of a 10% contribution to our employees' retirement. That's a combination of 401k match and ESOP contribution as owners each year. So that helps. It's hard, but even then, a kid that will jump ship for another 50 cents an hour, $1 an hour, you're trying to tell them, no, it's worth it. Stay for 30 years here, and you're going to have an account worth, $800,000, but they don't always think that way.
Yeah. Ben, Tom, any thoughts on what's worked for you guys in terms of recruiting in this tight labor market?
The first thing was retention. So it's
don't lose the person that's there, or at least, you know, you're trying to grow and add, so it's just not make the problem worse. So it's trying to develop more deeper relationships, especially with some of the key or newer employees, build that engagement, assigning mentors to programs, kind of the basic blocking and tackling. Then it came on to the recruiting side, being a little more strategic in how we go after candidates. So if it was a, you know, a salary position, we were using, you know, we started to use tools like LinkedIn and other items. But then, you know, the key real was to the point of move fast, you know, same day, next day offers. You had to, you don't have time to dwell and think about it. You're going to have to just trust your gut, use the process, look at the resumes. We also use a cultural index profile to help us with that. But those were kind of the key attributes.
Mm-hmm.
Just to build a little bit on Benjamin's point about retention, maybe a little bit like Sachin, we hired 60 people over the last little over a year, but that was only for 30 positions. And we learned the hard way that, yes, speed is very important, but you got to hire the right people. And we changed actually our interview process, particularly for hourly people. We started bringing them through the plant as part of the interview process. And we told our leads, look for certain things. Do they make eye contact? Will they greet other people? Are they curious? Will they go up to the machine? Will they ask questions? And frankly, if they're not going to do those things, they're probably not going to succeed in our environment. So, you know, working in a manufacturing environment is not for everybody. And particularly when you have a strong culture, I think, JP, you're exactly right. And by being out on the floor, they're forced to kind of interact with some of our people and get to know our culture. And the way they react to that teaches us a lot. And so we added that step to our process. And if they're not curious, if they're just kind of looking away or, you know, shuffling through the plant as quick as they can, then we don't hire them. Even though we need them, we don't hire them because what we found is they're going to be gone 4 to 6 weeks from now anyway. So really having a little bit more process and discipline around making sure you're getting the right people for the right jobs for the right reasons, because it comes down to retention. I mean, you said it, but you're 100% right. It's one thing to get people hired, but if they're just turning over every 8 weeks, you've solved nothing.
Mm-hmm. Got a few audience questions around remote or hybrid work, and obviously you can't take a printing press home with you, or you know, I'm sure the Foundry doesn't go mobile very well. But for roles that can be, are any of you allowing remote, hybrid? How are you approaching what's become more and more kind of an expectation for some classes of workers? And Ben, I know you guys have had some.
We're drifting back to in the office. We have, you know, as I said, 4 different manufacturing locations, 5 offices. Some of those offices stayed in office, some of them went remote. The ones where we had the most problems were the ones that we allowed employees to go remote or go to a hybrid. So it's tough kind of clawing that back. You know, so we're trying to take the right approach to it. At the same standpoint, you know, when everyone started going hybrid, or, you know, I'm more efficient and more effective at home, okay. But then let's talk about engagement and mentoring. You know, so if we're going to bring on 10 new people in their early 20s, who's going to teach them the business? Who's going to instill that culture? I don't think that's going to take place via Zoom. And that's really been kind of the key threads of, you know, the communications everyone is, we need to get back to 2019. We need to get everyone in the office. We can be flexible if you got a doctor's appointment and things of that nature. I'm not talking about anything draconian along those lines, but, you know, kind of this, I'll be working 3 days at home and 2 days in the office. It's not sustainable. You know, everyone needs to be there to support the team.
Mm-hmm. Especially when we were talking ahead of this, the closer you are to the shop floor. I think the example you gave was materials. You know, on the one hand, it made it seem like, oh, I can do this work remotely, but being on the shop floor and really having that interaction, touching, feeling, seeing what the floor is working with.
It drives the urgency. I mean, it's really easy to ignore it or not see it if you're sitting in your living room, where if, you know, it's those casual interactions where someone comes up in the office and, hey, we're almost out of this, or we need this, or this batch that just came in as bad, and you can get that instantaneous reaction to it versus, oh wait, now it goes 3 more processes down and someone finally rejects it, now a week goes by. There's definitely a correlation, I would say, to profitability, to how much, the percentage of the employees that were back in the office.
I don't, I totally get what you're saying, Benjamin, for sure. I'm not a fan of remote work. I mean, I've worked 5 remote work days through all of COVID. I was, for various reasons. But our employees we sent home in March of 20, and then July 5th of 21, I guess, is when we brought them all back. And there was a little bit of a rebellion because they really liked it. Someone really liked it, and they wanted to have some, and then we started to lose some people. And so we went to 1-day remote for anybody that could work it out with their manager. And what made it okay was, as much as I don't like remote work, and I think you don't develop the camaraderie, you don't have the hallway communication, the urgency that you mentioned is a really good point. But they really enjoyed it, and the truth was they seemed like they got a lot done, actually. Our employees did, the ones that were capable of doing their job remote. So we eventually went to 2 days remote for every employee. They work it out with their manager. If their job is capable of being done remote, and we're still in that status, senior leaders can only do 1 day. And then the big thing was it's a fairness factor. Not like materials folks, they don't work remote. They're there, and they do that on purpose. We don't tell them they can't, but the job can't be done remote. The other part was the shop. So the shop has all these people that are working remote in the office, and they're privileged. So we had a creative solution that my plant manager came up with, and he decided that he would let people work 9 or 10-hour days, Monday through Thursday, and we still needed production on Friday because trucks have to leave on Friday. So he had to put in a minimum of 4 hours on Friday. But if you got your, whatever our mandatory hours were, at one point there was 53 hours, and then we got down to 45 hours, and now we're at 40. But if it was 45 hours, if you got 45 hours in by 11 o'clock Friday morning, you can start your weekend. And truthfully, I think a lot of the office people would wish they had the shop flexibility program because everyone loves starting their weekend at 11 o'clock on a Friday morning. But so we tried some creative things in that regard.
Gotcha. Any other remote work thoughts?
How many people hate this topic? It's brutal. I prefer for people to be in the office, but I'm trying not to dictate it. You know what I mean? I mean, Dave and I talked about this. I'm trying to kind of lead by example. And then my executive team was all in, and then I think more of their people are all in. But I don't know if we can go back to the days to dictating you're going to sit at a desk for 40 hours a week. I don't know if that's productive either. So I don't know. I truly don't know. If somebody has the answer, please tell me. But I think every company, every situation, every employee is going to be unique. And I think we have to, as leaders, be prepared for that. And it's not fun, and I can use other words to describe it. But but I think this is our new reality, is that you have to look at the individual, and you have to trust your leaders to make good decisions about how they manage their teams. And if you're going to try to dictate a solution for everyone, I think those days are over. Just my 2 cents.
Well, I was going to hold my peace exactly for the reason that Tom said, that it feels like everybody's kind of remote worked out. But I think you both, Pat and Tom, especially raised some interesting points where I would say 2 things. One is the cynic in me just says that this whole remote work thing is a symptom of a very tight labor market, and we're just making concessions for people, and that'll change. When the labor market slows down, everybody's going to come back to the office, is what I think. Personally, we don't allow remote work just because it doesn't work with what we do. But so that would be my cynical point of view. But the one place that kind of softens my heart on this is childcare, which has become a nightmare for most parents. Is not available for the same reasons. All of us can't get people. It's too expensive. No one can afford it. And when we're trying to get our workforce to kind of punch above its weight, we need to allow flexibility for people. And I think childcare is a mess, and it won't get resolved for a long time because that's going to take that market, time to heal and raise wages and get parents to pay more, and that's just going to be a long time coming. So until then, I think we're going to have to live with some flexibility around remote work.
Yeah, got a 3-year-old. Can confirm. Expensive, even with 2 days at grandma's house. So,
Just wait, it doesn't get easier.
I've heard. Just got a minute or two left. Want to wrap up. We've talked a lot of, there's a lot of challenge, a lot of issues in the economy, different things like that. What one thing has you optimistic about manufacturing in Wisconsin heading forward? Just to wrap up here. Or two things, or three, if you can fit it in 2 minutes.
You know, we have a great workforce here in Wisconsin. You know, I've had a chance to work for companies that have manufacturing around the world, actually, and the work ethic of people here in Wisconsin and the way people work together, the collaboration, I think it's a Midwestern thing, you know, you could call it, but I think that's why Wisconsin's going to win in the end, because people, we have people that when they work, they want to work and they want to do what's right for their families, and they want to do what's right for their companies. So that's why I'm pro-Wisconsin, and we continue to invest in Wisconsin, because I think we have just a phenomenal workforce, and in the end, that's how you win, is your people.
Yeah, well, that was exactly what I was going to say, and from a very specific reason, which is our technical education. I think, you know, this state's technical education, also the university system, is hands down at least the best that I've seen, and it's imbuing our people with technical skills that makes them more productive than probably the average worker. And I'd say another thing that makes me bullish on Wisconsin is the diversity of our end markets that we all serve. I mean, just look at the things that you guys make, as opposed to if you go to, you know, Ohio or, you know, southern Michigan, a lot of parts related to combustion engine vehicles that I don't know when those disappear, but it's going to be like 10 years, maybe 15 years, and it's going to be a slow game of musical chairs until then. And that's going to be miserable, you know, for them. And we have so much different. We have medical equipment, we have high-tech stuff, we have, you know, motors, axles, things that are not necessarily related to combusting gasoline or diesel. So that makes me very, very proud and optimistic about the state.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll go off the tracks a little bit, but I'll come back, I promise. You know, I often hear people talk about the next gen, like the young folks coming in the workplace, and how soft they are and how wimpy they are, and that they'll cry at work and you shouldn't cry at work and things like that. And so I guess from my perspective, I'm going to tell a little story real quick. My dad raised me, my mom and dad raised me, and my dad always said, Morans are leaders. As a Moran, we're a leader. My dad and my uncle, they're my biker buddies. We have a 3-man biker gang. And so I love those guys, but they're always, Moran's a leader. And so I always kind of pushed back on that as I was growing up, and so we've had this talk so long, so we're both on the same page now. But in my perspective, make sure I don't say something bad here, but there's always this push to prove to people that you're a leader, right? And it's almost overglorified a bit that like being a leader is special, right? And being a follower is less than. And so in order to be a great leader, in my opinion, you have to know how to follow. And so I have a board member, she's awesome, and she always says, because people have a problem with that word, follower is weak, right? It's not weak. And so she has a way of saying it, learn how to lead from the back of the room, right? You don't always have to fight to be up front and be the person that's vocal and be the person that's you know, in charge and has all the great ideas, because typically the folks that are presenting themselves like that are the ones that may have some things to work through anyway, right? And so the reason, now going back to the young folks that I've seen come through LMI right now have been tremendous at working together, working as a team, letting other people shine. It's when I started at LMI, the executive team, in my opinion, was a little bit of a mess. I didn't tell my mom that till year 2, but a constant jockeying for the spotlight, right? And so, and maybe I'm crazy, and everyone always says when they come to Wisconsin, everyone's so friggin' nice. Well, they are, and they treat people with respect and they're kind, right? That's the strength, is treating people with respect and being kind, and these young folks, they get it. And so, for all the things that they bring to the workplace that drives us nuts, because it drives me nuts when people cry all the time too, and it's and it's okay, by the way, it's okay to cry, right? I'm not suggesting that's the problem, but there is a level of professionalism that you want these folks to have when they come into the building, and so we just have to work with them on that. But it's okay, right? It's okay, and quite honestly, maybe you don't have to be a hard ass all the time either. Like, it's okay to show some emotion, and so I have some things to learn looking in the mirror. But I guess my point again, as I ramble here, these young folks, they get it. They work well together. And so there's some things around the work from home that I would tell you I hate it. I don't like to work from home. But what are we focused on? Results. And so if you can get the results, you can work from home. You know, prove to me you can get the results. That's it. And the team is working well together. And I think you said bullish. I'm with you on that. I think we've got a lot of great things happening here. And some of these young folks are pretty fun to watch.
Yeah. Pat, Ben, any quick thoughts?
Sure, I'll say I do appreciate the young guys, the young folks we have in our workforce too, and I'm bullish and feel good about manufacturing in Wisconsin because it seems like it's getting a little more swagger back. You know, for a long time, if you weren't going into IT or some consulting job or some service industry, it was like you were dirty. And we weld. I mean, our shop has a lot of cutting steel and welding in it, and some of the coolest images we have that prospective employees resonate with is when that ones with the guy in the welding helmet, you know, welding steel together. And a lot more young people think that's cool than I would have thought.
Sparks make for good photos and stuff.
I would add collaboration, I really think, is the difference. As I look at our workforces in the different areas, but our Wisconsin team tends to be a little more team-oriented. They can work through some of the tougher problems. They tend to lend and complement each other. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we don't have that same cohesion in some other locations. I would assume that's more the culture of the area than necessarily just our company.
Certainly. Well, thank you to our panel for being here. If you want to hear more from them, following this, they'll be in the breakout session with Dave Anderson. I got a whole phone full of questions to pass on to Dave. So everyone, thank you very much for being on this panel.